Lenticular print. The exhibition consists of 3D lenticular backlit photographic portraits of the participants. The lenticular print creates a sense of depth and three-dimensionality to the photographs. They are no longer flat images, but moving ones, and the human subjects within them move with you and cause you to move as you shift around in the viewing space, trying to find the ideal viewing position. The lenticular effect generates illusory dimensions, mirages of depth, by directing the eye in one direction while coaxing it to another. Viewed from alternating directions, a different shape, mood, and purpose of image can present itself as the eye tries to focus on what is different in each glimpse. As we increase and decrease our distance from the image, varying aspects reveal themselves, and the further away we get, the more resolved the image seems to be. Up close, the effect can be very disorienting. Light and shade dance elusively, the essence of the image evading the grip of our gaze. This varies according to the composition, the light, the shade, the shape, the subject and setting contained within it, as well as the amount of available light in the environment. The lenticular affords and creates resonant, dynamic appearances of reality in all the images, emphasizing the fact that we are not in control of the content, nor of the realities it represents. In these portraits, ultimately, the subject of each work is in command. Unfinished Business. Stories from Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people with disabilities. Audio descriptions of the images. These audio descriptions were prepared by Imogen Young and Linda Arnold from Insightful, with input by Nick Godley and Dita Neeram. Gail Rankin, Narrandjeri Woman. A black and white photograph of a woman leaning forwards, face resting in hands, surrounded by shadow. She has bright, dark eyes, fine penciled eyebrows, a broad nose with rounded nostrils and shapely, deep-hued lips. Her brow is etched with horizontal and vertical lines, and the lines at the sides of her eyes and beneath them are accentuated by her fingers pushing up the skin of her plump, full cheeks. Her little fingers rest diagonally across her cheeks, bent at the knuckle, forming symmetrical angles, almost a love heart shape, framing her face as it rests within the palms of her hands. The two other visible fingers each side of the face touch her temples. The fingernails are long and look manicured. Her hair is in shadow but seems pulled back from her face. Her skin is dark, paler towards the palms of the hands. There is a weathered, mature quality in the texture of her skin and the stillness and direct intensity of her gaze. At the same time, a sense of youthfulness and feminine glamour is conveyed in the gleam of the eyes and the intimate forward thrust of the pose, with the bare wrists and elegant fingers, if somewhat arthritic at the joints. At rest and yet challenging, an air of questioning plays about the lips, which are almost pursed, while the eyes express quiet knowingness and an ability to focus completely on what is before her. There is both strength and softness, steeliness and warmth, even tiredness versus determination, apparent in the portrait. Light falls on her face from the right, reflected in the whites of her eyes and as bright spots in the pupils. The light deepens the shadows in the creases of her skin and illuminates the poised presence, centered pose, and unavoidable gaze directed towards us against the darkness behind her. Yami Lester, Maralinga. An elderly man in his 70s or 80s, head and shoulders shot against landscape in background. The man is caught in a pool of light like headlights, and a flat expanse of dirt or sand, deeply scarred by two tire tracks, stretches behind him. Distinct groups of bushy trees can be seen some distance away, lit by a light source off frame. Light falls across his face like an eye mask. The focus is pulled immediately towards his eyes, particularly the one on the left, which is bathed in light and looks fixed in an unusually open stare, with pupil contracted, a hard black dot in the middle. The eye on the right looks almost closed, a slit, darkness and a glint within, puckered skin beneath. The man's hair is white, short, falling to over his right ear, thick and textured. He has rounded shoulders and wears an open-necked garment exposing the throat and the hollow at the base of it. His expression overall is one of calmness, at peace, apart from the eye which looks startled in a state of alarm. The lighting is dramatic, as if on a film set, and shadows pour from the right. The shot is one of vulnerability, yet the man looks approachable and resolved, though caught alone in the night in the midst of a stark landscape. Roy Mundine, the soldier. A man in his 70s, head and shoulders shot. He has white wispy hair, well groomed, and wears a dark suit jacket, pressed collar and striped tie, a broad row of military decorations on his left breast. On his forehead are 3 fine parallel horizontal lines like waves, and his cheek looks slightly sunken, touched by shadow. His lips are thin, his nose broad, his eyelids uncreased. The man's gaze is directed off frame, body turned slightly, and seems to be a look of inward recollection or contemplation, rather than a look directed at another person. His head is held high on the shoulders, and his expression seems calm, dignified, controlled, the face at rest, yet reflective. The medals, arranged in characteristic fashion overlapping each other slightly in a row, each with a somewhat different ribbon and metallic fixture hanging below, but all forming a solid bar across the chest, standing out against the dark jacket. The background resembles a jungle floor littered with leaves and dappled light, or perhaps crushed or battered metal, shiny and metallic. Bright light falls on his face from above, darkness behind him. Quaden, Georgetown. The activist. A small boy, a toddler, standing, facing to the right, head leaning right back, looking upward, shoulder-length, straggly, uncombed, light brown blonde hair. He looks upward, reaches upward, extending both arms and hands, surrounded at knee height by the knees and lower legs of several people. His little hands rest on the knees of one person to the right. To the left, behind him, the larger hands of an adult are placed over his head. There is movement in the hands as if they are caressing. Shadows dance across the image, a suggestion of movement, a forest of legs, the tiny child amongst them, a look of much anticipation on his face.
Carol Carter, Malpractice. 2 different shots of the same woman. The composition is split vertically in half, with one image taking up the right-hand side and lower left, and the other image taking up the left-hand top quarter only. On the left, looking relaxed, the woman has long flowing shoulder-length hair and wears a white t-shirt with text on it. Part of an incomplete word is visible, spelling LIFES, cut off, with little figures underneath that look like part of an Australian heraldic device. The shot is cropped at the waist, where her hand is on her hip. She stands in front of a pale wall behind her. On the right-hand side and lower left of the image, the same woman seated with the same smile, same face, but older. Her hair is swept over her forehead towards the ear. She wears a summer dress with straps and a floral print which reaches to just above the knees. Again, her hand is on her hip, but positioned a bit higher and somewhat less comfortably, tucked in against her side, with elbow resting on the arm of the wheelchair in which she sits. Her smile on both sides of the image is sassy, no nonsense, fun, down to earth. Eve Kitchener, Stolen. A woman with pale skin, made up, hidden amid foliage, her face is partially obscured by shadowy, blurry plants. We can only see the eye on the right, one huge dark eye visible, heavily outlined in mascara. She has fine features, and the dappled shadow falling on her cheek give her a somewhat gaunt appearance. Long dark hair falls over one shoulder. Her lips are full, shapely, held together, wearing a dark shade of lipstick. Her worried gaze is direct, but not entirely present, brimming with emotion. Gary Umbagai, Hanging Tree. A man aged in his 20s or 30s with short dark hair receding a little, dark eyes and a beard neither wild and long nor neatly groomed. He is looking straight at the viewer through the V-shape of forked tree branches. To the right, the rough, segmented bark of the trunk, close up. To the left, this is obscured by his hand dominating the foreground, his fingers firmly grasping the tree, seeming larger, out of focus. He has a gently searching gaze, conveying active concern, looking upwards as if towards someone looking down at him from higher up in the tree, as he stands near it, arms raised.
Gayangwalalara, MJD. A woman, head and shoulders, leaning back slightly from the photo, in an exposed landscape. She has deep-set, thoughtful eyes, deep pouches underneath them. Frizzy, natural, thick, wiry hair, a crooked smile, lips together. She has a careworn demeanour, and there is a lack of artifice about her. She wears a sleeveless floral shift with a loose, open neckline, her upper arms just visible in the frame. The exterior light has an intensity which is hazy, and the blurry background looks like the dimpled surface of the ocean behind her, with no other identifying landmarks, save the horizon, a smudged, darker line. There is a weathered weariness to her expression, yet it is calm, warm, and welcoming at the same time. She looks worn out, yet not defeated, perhaps rueful, not bitter, fully present and at home in the environment where she stands. Jake Briggs, Soul Deep. An adolescent or young adult, gender indeterminate. We can see his face only in the centre of the frame, and his eyes, pale and dreamy, look intently ahead. He has shapely, full lips with a slight downturn and a neutral expression, though the gaze is piercing as if looking through us, beyond. There is the smooth and shredded trunk of a paperbark tree behind, and the peeling strips of tissuey bark cover the top of his head like a headdress or hair and surround his face as though he is embedded in and emerging from the tree. There is a sheen to the sinewy bark, rough and silky at once. Lit from above, one eye peers out of darkness, one out of light. Jandamara O'Shane, Tattoo. A robust young man, in his 20s, his back facing towards us, leaning slightly to the right. His face is in semi-profile, only half his eye, the tip of his nose, and part of his lip protruding are visible. His full, round cheek has a smooth, youthful complexion, and he has thick, dark hair which is wavy and short. The sweep of his broad, manly, bare back and fleshy upper arms is covered in patterns, textures and whorls, raised and indented areas, marbled and pigmented, deep grooves and raised patches with undulating lines like smoke or ripples in water, and at the lower left of his back, a cross-hatched area like netting. The tops of his arms are knotty with folds and creases and held out from his body as if in a stylized pose of defense or display of strength, like a sumo wrestler or a tribal warrior. There is a contained power, a dynamic energy to the stance he holds. Behind him, at upper left, what appears to be the shadowy grooves of a giant tree trunk. Although his back is turned, he is not caught unawares. He shows us his back like a shield, clothed in his scarring like armour. He presents himself to the viewer, wearing his skin with pride. Joanna Agus, Sound of Silence. A face lit from below, theatrically. Black shadow closes in around the head so that only the face is visible. The face is heavily decorated with intricate symmetrical patterns. Oh, I have to start again. Joanna Agus, Sound of Silence. A face lit from below, theatrically. Black shadow closes in around the head so that only the face is visible. The face is heavily decorated with intricate symmetrical patterns either tattooed or projected or painted on. Deep vertical lines from hairline to between the eyebrows as if drawn on with 2 fingers, whereas the patterning on the cheeks particularly is more detailed and has a South Sea Islander aesthetic. 2 bright points of light gleam from either ear. Her gaze is directly... Her gaze is... Sorry. From either ear. Her gaze is intensely directed to a point somewhere beneath her and not at the viewer. The lighting is dramatic. She glows in the dark, spotlit, her face fine-boned, with a narrow nose and a shaded look to the coloration on the chin and outer cheeks. John Baxter, Standing Tall. A man aged in his 30s or 40s, shot from below, looking upwards at a right angle, jaw clenched, squinting perhaps towards the horizon, out of shot. He looms in the frame, with broad shoulders, hairy chest and hairy arms. His muscled, bare upper chest is exposed, and his waist is cinched with a deep belly button. His lower body looks less robust than the upper torso. He is shot from the left in 3/4 profile. His right hand rests on a crutch which also encircles his arm further up. He grips another walking stick in his left hand. The background is empty sky, and there is strength, fragility, determination, and a sense of direction in the figure standing against it.
Josh Lennox, the wild man. A man aged in his 40s, slender, with pale skin, standing upright. He is shot from waist height, facing to the left of the frame, in 3/4 profile. His hairy chest is bare. He has a shaggy beard and short brown hair. There are strokes of white paint across parts of his face, chest, hair, and head. Both hands clasp the paintbrush to his chest. The tip, pointing upwards towards his face, has been dipped in the same white paint that daubs him, suggesting he is still in the act of adorning himself. He has a toothy half-smile on his face, an air of mischief, and his eyes seem focused on something a short distance away.
June Oscar, the matriarch. A woman, head and shoulders, in her 40s or 50s. She has full cheeks, a fleshy face, pronounced chin. Her lips are set together. Her eyes, almond-shaped, with paler irises and delicately arched eyebrows. There is a gleam in the whites of the eyes, and they fix the viewer directly. Her gaze is arresting, the expression challenging. Over either shoulder, another human figure is visible. On the left, a male's face, somewhat blurred, and on the right, a female's face, leaning to either side of the woman in the middle. She wears a dress of patterned fabric with a broad neckline, showing the soft flesh. One earring is visible on the ear at the left. The impression is one of a strong, serious, and determined woman. Kay Sadler, Freshwater, Saltwater. A woman with splashes of light and shadow across her face. She has slender, high cheekbones, and there are lines across her forehead. But the eyes are the only feature of her face really visible, due to the light, like reflections off water, the glints and shadows creating patterns across her face. Her hands are crossed across her chest, and the whites of her strong, sharp eyes are prominent, giving her powerful gaze a challenging strength. The reflections ripple and sparkle like the surface of water, and there are darker flecks and irregular shapes like foliage. The shadowy light surrounds her, giving the image an edgy energy. She has a glow, yet the image has a secretive feeling, a magical quality. Uncle Kevin Coombs. Honorary Pom. A man aged in his 60s or 70s perhaps. He has white, close-cropped hair and wears black-framed, rectangular-shaped eyeglasses that lend a faintly studious air. He looks intently at the viewer, firmly, quietly. He has smooth, brown skin, dark eyes, deep furrows between the eyes and deep grooves down cheeks and jowls. He wears a dark-coloured shirt and his hands and wrists are crossed in front at chest height. The fingers on the hand to the left are spread, a wedding ring on his third finger. The hand on the right dangles something gingerly against the chest, a metal item with a ribbon attached, a sporting medal. A spoked wheel is propped directly behind him, creating a large round halo shape. Light is reflected off the wheel, casting an elongated oval-shaped shadow across the background of the frame, giving the impression of a stadium. On the wall where this shadow falls, there is a projection and large details of a passport showing official stamps and dates, partially obscured, and text in multiple languages. He is lean of frame and conveys a gentle seriousness, a quiet intensity.
Leslie Flanders. Penny for your thoughts. A woman aged in her 60s perhaps, with white hair and a loose bun, standing in the living room, centre right, holding and embracing a young girl, centre left, who looks to be aged 10 or less. The little girl has dark hair and pale skin and wears a sleeveless dress. Her face is obscured a little by the entirety of the embrace. Her eyes are closed in an expression of peace and quiet contentment. The woman's face, in shadow, nuzzles the girl's hair. A strand of white hair falls to her shoulder, clad in a t-shirt. The woman looks physically strong, and the child looks weaker, not gripping, but being held up. The contrast between the child's paler skin and the woman's darker skin is seen as their arms interlink. It is a private, intimate glimpse into an inner world, exuding warmth and tenderness between two people. Just behind the girl, part of a chair with handles for pushing can be seen. Several paintings hang on the wall. The movement of their embrace, as if they are about to or have just swirled around, is enhanced by the unsettling angle of the photograph. One of the paintings in the background also features off-kilter angles like a close-up of pieces in a mosaic. The ordinary stuff of life, books, cushions, a couch, is strewn around them, but they are lost in the embrace.
Lester Bostock. The Statesman. Head and shoulders shot of a man in a tailored suit jacket, pinstriped. It is an animated shot, documentary style, not a resolved still pose. There is a sense of movement in it. The background is black and has a feeling of being shot in a studio, slightly formal. The man is commanding, authoritative, and as if in mid-conversation or part of a dialogue. He has thinning hair, fine and white, trimmed neatly, and a white beard and moustache, and wears large framed spectacles. His skin is a medium tone. He has an air of being kindly and exudes a confidence and an assurance. His shoulders fill the width of the frame, giving him an imposing appearance, and he looks to be engaged with someone or something, an interlocutor, making a statement or arguing an important line of thought. The eyes are interrogative, yet not hostile. There is a tenderness and a compassion there. The photo seems not to be about him, but of his outward project, and an element of response or action is implied. 10. Lupine Clark, The Kooyong. A young woman with full cheeks and pale skin dominating the right foreground of the frame. She has dark, straight, shoulder-length hair and wears a dark beret tilted at a jaunty angle to the left on her head, a large flower attached. The beret rests just on her cheekbone at the left, and she wears dark lipstick. Her significant cleavage, almost at right angles to her throat, has a thick swathe of hair resting on it, and the satiny décolletage of her dress lifts slightly away from the flesh, creating a line of shadow. Two blurred figures to the left, one an older man, chin in hand, suggest a social setting. She wears a half smile, at ease, contented, proud. Marie Calchiorta, mother. A woman, middle-aged, her face surrounded by darkness. The face fills the frame, no shoulders or neck are visible, and thick, dark hair spreads to either side in waves. Her skin is very dark, and there is a wetness in her eyes, lending her expression a deeply emotive quality. She has a large broad nose and full lips downturned at the edges. Her eyes are deep set, and shadows fall on her brow. There is light on the inner cheeks and past the bridge of the nose. She has an outward gaze into the distance that we can't see. Marlon Noble, noble cause. A man in his 30s or 40s, thick, dense beard, large eyes and eyebrows, close-cropped black hair, very dark skin, shot to just beneath the chin. His head is contained in a cage. The circular metal bird cage, painted a pale colour, only just fits over his head. 3 little fat, artificial birds with short tails are perched on the outside, gripping the vertical bars of the cage with their claws. The bird at the lower left looks outward, and the 2 on the right crane inwards, peering at the man. One of the bars casts a shadow across his forehead above his right eye. The cage has an intricate decorative border across the top, which crowns his head, and there is also a fake butterfly attached. The man eyes us through the bars with a look of gravity. His expression is grave, yet also seems one of bemusement, as though he is poking fun at his circumstances, the direct gaze challenging us with a seriousness at odds with the cuteness of the birds. The daintiness of the birdcage and the uncaged artificial birds, juxtaposed with the man's head trapped within, deliver an unsettling mood. The light strikes from the left, the right side in shadow, and the whites of his eyes are highlighted.
Mavis Wayne.
The Purple House. Woman in her 50s, hands clasped at her chin, with short, dark, collar-length hair, white at the hairline and temples. Her face is heavy-set, with a square jawline, and she is frowning, deep lines between her eyes and on her forehead, pouchy cheeks and grooves down either side of her nose. She has full lips set together, unsmiling, and a broad nose. She has her hands clasped together as if in a plea, and they are bound together with loops of clear plastic tubing wrapped several times around her slender wrists, and plastic clips, possibly medical equipment. A white band is around her wrist on the right. She wears a weary and resigned expression on her face, yet also conveys a contemplative self-containment.
Patty Mundine, by Ugu. An older woman, head and shoulders, in what looks like a thick chenille dressing gown, collar and knobbly fabric visible. She has thick, dark, short, wiry hair, smooth, dark skin, deep-set, dark eyes with heavy, hooded lids, black circles below both eyes. A hand with gnarled fingers held at throat level, very smooth, almost translucent skin on her hands. She holds a clear plastic respiratory mask up to her face, covering her mouth and nose. Her gaze is impenetrable, shadowed and rendered hard to access by the mask prominent in the image, and the hand gripping it.
Rex Bellotti Jr. TBA, to be advised. An informal shot like a snapshot. A young person leaning back from the camera, wearing a beanie, head tilted to the left-hand side of the image. His mouth is partially obscured by his hand, which rests on the knee of his left leg, with foot at centre foreground of image. His left hand rests on the ankle. The whole of the lower leg is exposed, and light hits the mottled skin over the shin. Either side of the shin bone are deep gouges where muscle should be. Rather than the youthful musculature that might be expected, the visible part of the leg has a scarred, damaged, emaciated look, and the skin tone looks different to that of the hands and arms. The bone looks slightly warped. The long toes of the left foot point towards us at the front of the frame. Behind him, deep shadows of an interior with angles of furniture visible. There is a reticence to his demeanour in contrast to the boldness of the display of his leg. An angle of light from above creates 3 distinct shades of white to grey on the wall behind. His expression is hard to read, blasé perhaps, or just withheld. The leg is the focus of the image as he presents it for display, without show or shyness. There is a protectiveness to the way his 2 hands gently hold his leg forward at knee and ankle as he leans back, giving the leg prominence. Rex Japananka granites, bush medicine. An elderly man aged in his 70s or 80s with very dark, smooth skin and large brown eyes. His face is framed entirely by his thick white hair and long beard. The image is cropped on each of the 4 sides and fills the entire frame. A smooth, deep forehead, undulating lines across it. His white hair and obvious old age belie his youthful demeanour. He has a spark in his eyes and an expression of knowingness and vigour, a provocativeness verging on playful. He is inviting and engaging and wears his age well with pride.
15. Reese Nagus, Lifesaver. A man looking upwards at the sky, head and shoulders shot. In his 30s or 40s with dark olive-toned skin and a solid frame, his head, wide neck and shoulders are front and centre. His face is tilted back, accentuating his broad nose and large round nostrils, and he wears a collared, open-neck shirt with vertical stripes. A tightly fitted cap, like a lifesaver's cap, is on his head, chin strap fastened beneath his chin. 4 pale round studs across the cap above his forehead. Tufts of dark frizzy curly hair pop out from both sides of the cap at the back, either side of his neck. He has an ambivalent expression, and we can't tell if he is focused on something specific or simply gazing into the distance above. Something blurry, possibly a flag moving on a pole behind him, or cables suspended behind his head. And there is an indistinct structure in the background to the left, possibly a large building, adding to the vague feeling of uncertainty that arises from his distant look.
20. Steve Withers, Visionary Man. A man's face in 3/4 profile, probable age over 55. He has a high forehead with the hairline far back and some white hair just visible above the forehead or temples. A broad nose with rounded nostrils, a cleft between the eyes, a thick white moustache combed downwards. His face seems to float in the upper left of the frame, surrounded by darkness. The eye further away seems pale with an arched eyebrow, and the eye closer is almost totally obscured in shadow. We can only just see a glint and the roundness of the eye socket. Smoke in rings and curls around the head emerging from the darkness. Ethereal, like an apparition or vision, disembodied, floating, with a gaze wistful, considering, focused, sharp yet dreamy. Tyrone, the carer. A young boy, centre of frame, head tilted slightly downward. Large dark eyes, short soft dark hair brushed forward on his forehead. He is half smiling, shyly. In front, Just below his chin is the top of a head of a younger child with curly dark hair. Her head rests on his chest. The blurred profile of a woman, her cheek, shoulder, and ear in shot, is behind him. Her hands rest on each of his shoulders, tenderly, protectively. His expression is shy, slightly wistful, and his brow is furrowed. The boy's eyes are in half circle, shaded by his lush dark eyebrows. He is the central figure in the image. Hope Campbell. Hope. A very young and slender figure, apparently unclothed. There is a bare arm and shoulder visible, and the bare curve of waist and narrow hip on the left. Long light hair with lighter tips tumbles forward, completely covering the face and front of body. The hair is tousled, tangled, fine, and hangs all the way to the waist, dangling over the forearms, which are crossed across the front of the body, hands held around the upper arms. Streaks of patterned light stream from the upper left corner, radiating out towards the lower right behind her, suggesting movement, a rush of speed or light, wind or energy, and some textured earth perhaps behind her to the left. There is a provocativeness to the image. She seems intent on covering up, yet defiant in the pose with the arms. There is naturalness versus defensiveness, an innocence but also a confidence in the act of not giving anything away, an unreality, a mystical quality to the light and the lack of identifiable context give a suggestion, along with the streaming light, of time passing, forwards or backwards, a continuum.
Roseanne Fulton, The Forgotten. An image of erasure. Stark white light, like heat, like phosphorescence, forms a patch amidst the weathered, worn, scratched back, obscured surrounds. Searing, a blinding flash of light that makes you flinch. Around this, deep black and paler greys, murky and indistinguishable. Like an old photograph scarred and the original layers scraped away, or a new image with surface damaged or imperfectly processed. Vertical lines like paint dribbles or spindly tree trunks. The effect is of acid wash eating into the image. Unrecognizable, yet tangible, visible presence. Not an identifiable portrait of an individual face or body. Whiteout, representation of absence versus presence.